The rain came down in relentless sheets, drenching the cracked streets of a quiet Midwestern town. Thunder growled in the distance, its echoes weaving into the wailing wind. Inside a dimly lit apartment, Rebecca Taylor clutched a thin blanket to her chest, her thoughts as turbulent as the storm outside. In the corner, her infant daughter Lily coughed weakly, her tiny body shivering, despite the layers of clothes Rebecca had wrapped around her. Rebecca glanced toward the worn-out sofa, where her son Daniel sat, staring out of the window as lightning illuminated the stark reality of their lives. His dark curls framed a face, too young for the burdens he carried, yet his eyes held a fierce determination. He had always been the protector, the one who stood strong when Rebecca faltered. Tonight, everything felt heavier. Heavier than the damp air clinging to the walls, heavier than the regret that gnawed at her soul. The sound of shattering glass outside startled her, and she instinctively moved to shield her children. In that moment, Rebecca knew something had to change. But change, she feared, came with consequences, consequences she wasn't sure they were ready to face. Outside, amidst the roar of the storm, a boy's desperate steps pounded against the wet pavement. Daniel clutched his baby sister close, her soft cries muffled by the blanket. His heart hammered, not just from running, but from the fear that had been building for months. He needed help, and he needed it now. As the neon lights of the local police station flickered in the distance, Daniel made a decision that would unravel a web of secrets, fears, and truths. He pushed open the station's doors, his voice cutting through the storm as he shouted, "Arrest my mom!" Little did he know, this plea for help would ignite a journey that would test their family's resilience and unearth a story of strength, redemption, and courage. Thunder rumbled like a restless beast as the glass doors of the local police station swung open with a crash. Drenched and trembling, Daniel Taylor stumbled inside, clutching a small bundle wrapped in a threadbare blanket. His sneakers squished against the floor, leaving puddles in his wake. For a moment, the room stilled, the handful of officers on duty frozen by the sheer intensity of his entrance. "Arrest my mom!" Daniel's voice cracked, while the raw desperation carried through the silence like a siren. Behind her desk, Officer Emily Hayes blinked in surprise, her pen pausing mid-signature. The boy couldn't have been more than 11. His oversized hoodie hung off his thin frame, soaked through to the bone, and dark curls plastered against his forehead. But it was his eyes that struck Emily, a mix of fear, exhaustion, and something deeper. Determination. "Someone grab a towel," Emily barked as she rose from her seat. Her knees protested slightly, a reminder that retirement was closer than she liked to admit. Still, there was no hesitation as she approached the boy, crouching slightly to meet his gaze. "Hey there, sweetheart. I'm Officer Hayes, but you can call me Emily," she said, her voice soft but steady. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he whispered, his grip tightening on the bundle. The blanket shifted, revealing the flushed face of a baby, no more than a few months old. Emily's heart clenched as the baby let out a weak, rattling cough. "And who's this little one?" she asked gently. "Lily," Daniel said, his voice barely audible over the rain pounding against the windows. "My sister." Emily noticed the boy's shoulders trembling, not just from the cold, but from the weight of something far heavier. She reached out, draping a towel over his shoulders, before gesturing to a nearby officer. "Bring some cocoa from the break room." "Daniel," Emily said, keeping her tone calm, "can you tell me why you're here? Why you said what you did?" The boy hesitated, his lip trembling. "My mom. She tried to steal formula today. She didn't get caught. But when we got home, she broke down. She kept saying she's no good. that we'd be better off without her. Emily's chest tightened as she listened. She glanced at the baby again, noting how Lily's chest rose and fell with labored effort. Her little fists waved weakly, and her eyes fluttered open, revealing a cloudiness that Emily didn't like. "When's the last time Lily saw a doctor?" Emily asked softly. Daniel looked away, shame flashing across his face. "She's been coughing for a while. Mom said the medicine was too expensive." Emily nodded, her mind already racing through possible steps. "You did the right thing coming here, Daniel," she said. "We're going to help you. Both of you." The early morning sun filtered weakly through the grimy windows of the Taylor's apartment. The light did little to brighten the dreary interior. A small, cramped space with peeling wallpaper and mismatched furniture. Emily glanced around, her trained eyes taking in every detail. The water stains spreading across the ceiling, the threadbare carpet beneath her boots, and the sparse shelves in the corner that held only a few cans of food and a battered teddy bear. Rebecca stood by the window, her arms wrapped protectively around herself, as if holding her body together. Her sharp gaze darted toward Emily, filled with both defiance and weariness. Daniel sat on the floor near the couch, idly drawing patterns in the dusty carpet with his finger. The tension in the air was palpable, a brittle thing ready to snap. Emily chose her words carefully. "Rebecca, I'm not here to judge you. But this isn't sustainable. Lily is sick, and Daniel is carrying burdens no child should ever have to bear." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't lie awake every night, trying to figure out how to make things better?" "I'm not doubting your intentions," Emily replied, keeping her voice even. "But intentions alone won't keep your kids safe." Rebecca bristled, turning away. "You don't know what it's like. You don't know how hard it is." "You're right," Emily said simply. "I don't know your exact struggles, but I've seen enough to recognize someone who's been fighting battles alone for too long. Let us help." As Daniel retreated to his small room, Emily took a seat at the kitchen table, gesturing for Rebecca to join her. After a long moment of hesitation, Rebecca sank into the chair opposite her, her movements slow and reluctant. Emily leaned forward, her tone soft but firm. "Tell me about Victor." Rebecca stiffened, her fingers curling into fists on the table. "Why?" "Because whatever he did to you is still affecting your life, and I need to understand what we're dealing with." The question hung in the air like an open wound. Rebecca's jaw worked, her eyes darting to the hallway where Daniel had disappeared. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was charming at first. Made me feel special, like I mattered. But that didn't last." Her eyes grew distant as she continued. "At first, it was small things, putting me down, controlling who I talked to. Then, it got worse. He made me do things I didn't want to do. Said if I didn't help him, he'd hurt me, or worse, hurt Daniel." Emily listened without interrupting, her hands folded tightly on the table. "He ran credit card scams, used fake IDs. He made me sign things, contracts, loans. When it all came crashing down, he disappeared, left me to take the fall." Rebecca's voice broke, her hands shaking. "They took me to court, said I was an accomplice. I served time, even though I didn't want any of it." Tears slipped down Rebecca's face as she gripped the edge of the table. "When I got out, nobody would hire me. I've been trying, but every door is slammed in my face." Emily exhaled slowly, her heart heavy with the weight of Rebecca's confession. "You've been carrying this alone for a long time," she said gently, "but it doesn't have to stay that way. There are resources, programs that can help you rebuild." Rebecca snorted, a bitter sound. Programs don't erase a record. They don't stop people from looking at me like I'm a criminal. No, they don't, Emily admitted. But they can help you start fresh, give you tools to fight back against the weight of all this. Rebecca's gaze fell to the table. Why do you care? People like me, we don't get second chances. Because everyone deserves one, Emily replied, her voice firm. And because Daniel walked into a police station last night, asking us to arrest you. That boy loves you so much, he's willing to do anything to protect his sister, even something that scared him half to death. Rebecca's breath hitched at the mention of Daniel. She wiped her face quickly, her expression guarded. What do you want me to do? The answer came in the form of a phone call. Emily dialed a number from memory, her fingers moving with purpose. Rebecca, this is Stacy Carter, she said after a moment. She runs a local charity that specializes in helping families in situations like yours. Rebecca frowned, suspicion flashing across her face. A charity? They don't ask questions about your past, Emily assured her. They focus on where you are now and where you want to go. Rebecca hesitated, but finally nodded. Fine. I'll talk to her. That afternoon, Emily drove Rebecca and Daniel to the charity's modest office on the edge of town. The building was unassuming, with its chipped paint and faded sign, but the inside was warm and inviting. Soft music played in the background, and the receptionist greeted them with a smile that didn't feel forced. Stacy Carter emerged from her office, a petite woman with a confident stride and kind eyes. She extended a hand to Rebecca. I'm so glad you came, she said warmly. Let's sit down and talk. For the next hour, Stacy walked Rebecca through the charity's programs, childcare assistance, job training, food vouchers, and access to affordable health care. Rebecca listened quietly, her walls slowly coming down as Stacy's genuine kindness chipped away at her mistrust. When Stacy handed her a small envelope containing vouchers for groceries and baby formula, Rebecca's hand trembled. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice raw. Because no one should have to do this alone, Stacy replied simply. By the time they left the office, something had shifted in Rebecca. It was subtle, a straightening of her spine, a steadier tone in her voice. But Emily noticed it. You're not alone anymore, Emily reminded her as they walked to the car. This is the first step. Rebecca glanced at Daniel, who was holding a bag of donated clothes for Lily. For the first time in years, she felt a sliver of hope. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there. That evening, as Rebecca unpacked the groceries, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pencil. He sketched with quick, fluid movements, his focus intense. What are you drawing? Rebecca asked, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. Just something for Lily, Daniel replied, holding up the paper. It was a simple drawing of their family, Rebecca holding Lily, with Daniel standing beside them under a bright sun. Rebecca's throat tightened as she looked at the picture. She pulled Daniel into a hug, holding him close. Thank you, she whispered. For the first time in a long time, Rebecca felt like they might be able to make it through. Cliffhanger. That night, a soft knock sounded at the door. Rebecca froze, her heart pounding. When she opened it, she found a single envelope on the mat. Inside was a note, scrawled in a familiar hand. I know where you are. The first rays of dawn spilled across the Taylor apartment, casting a soft glow over the cracked walls and worn furniture. Rebecca stood by the window, cradling a mug of lukewarm coffee, her gaze distant. The weight of the note from the night before hung heavily in the room, though she had tucked it away in a drawer, out of Daniel's sight. The words still burned in her mind. I know where you are. Morning brought activity to their small home. Daniel busied himself with Lily, who cooed softly in her bassinet, her tiny fist batting at the mobile overhead. Rebecca had planned to spend the day stewing over her fears, but a knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Emily standing there, holding a paper bag filled with groceries. "I figured you could use a hand," Emily said with a small smile, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Besides, we've got plans today." Rebecca frowned. "Plans?" Emily set the bag on the counter. "I'm taking you to meet Stacy again. We need to get Lily looked at, and there's an art program for Daniel I think he'll like." "An art program?" Daniel perked up from his spot on the floor. His wide eyes darted to Rebecca for approval. Rebecca hesitated. The idea of facing more strangers, letting anyone else into her fragile life, filled her with dread. But Daniel's hopeful expression was impossible to ignore. "Fine," she said finally. "We'll go." The charity's clinic bustled with quiet efficiency. Nurses and volunteers moved through the small space, their voices low and calming. Stacy greeted them warmly, leading them into a private exam room where a doctor examined Lily. Rebecca fidgeted in her seat, watching as the doctor gently checked Lily's breathing. "She's a little underweight," the doctor said, glancing at his chart. "And that cough, likely a lingering respiratory infection. We'll get her started on some antibiotics." Rebecca nodded stiffly, relief warring with guilt. She had known Lily was unwell, but hadn't been able to afford the medicine. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. After Lily's appointment, Stacy took Rebecca and Daniel to another wing of the charity building. The smell of paint and markers filled the air, and cheerful voices echoed from the wide open space. Children sat at tables scattered with art supplies, their faces focused on their creations. Daniel's eyes lit up as he took in the scene. "This is the art program," Stacy explained. "It's a safe space for kids to express themselves and build confidence." Daniel hesitated, glancing at Rebecca. She nodded slightly, and he stepped forward, his curiosity winning out over his shyness. A volunteer handed him a sketch pad and a set of colored pencils, and Daniel quickly found a seat. Rebecca watched from the doorway as Daniel bent over the table, his pencil moving rapidly across the paper. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders relaxed, and a small smile tugged at his lips. Stacy stood beside her, a knowing smile on her face. "He's got a natural talent," she said softly. Rebecca's throat tightened. "He's always loved to draw. It's the one thing that makes him happy." "Then let's nurture it," Stacy said. "This program could be really good for him." Rebecca nodded, her defenses lowering just a fraction. Over the next few weeks, the Taylor family's routine began to shift. Rebecca started attending workshops at the charity, learning skills like resume writing and basic computer use. The sessions were challenging. Her confidence had been eroded by years of hardship. But Stacy and the other participants were supportive, creating an environment where Rebecca felt safe enough to try. Meanwhile, Daniel thrived in the art program. He spent hours sketching scenes from his imagination, pouring his emotions onto the page. His instructor, Ms. Claire, encouraged him to submit a piece for an upcoming showcase. "You have a gift, Daniel," she told him, holding up one of his drawings. "This is something special." One evening, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, a pile of worksheets spread before her. She chewed on the end of a pencil, her brow furrowed, as she attempted to solve a problem on basic budgeting. Across from her, Daniel worked on his art project, his face a mask of concentration. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said suddenly, not looking up from his paper. Rebecca blinked, startled. "What?" "You're working hard," he said simply. "You're trying. That means a lot. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. Thank you, sweetheart, she said, her voice thick. Just as the Taylors began to feel a semblance of stability, the ominous presence of Victor loomed once more. It started with small, unsettling signs. A shadow lingering near the apartment complex. The feeling of being watched during grocery runs. Rebecca tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but when she found a second note, taped to their door, a single word, soon, she knew her fears were real. Emily wasted no time when Rebecca showed her the note. She contacted Logan Reyes, a detective with a reputation for handling domestic abuse cases. Logan visited the Taylors' apartment, his sharp eyes scanning every corner as Rebecca recounted her history with Victor. This isn't just intimidation, Logan said grimly. He's trying to scare you into submission. Rebecca's hands trembled as she clutched Lily close. What can I do? We'll start with immediate safety measures, Logan said. New locks, security cameras, and a restraining order. The idea of filing a restraining order terrified Rebecca. But Emily and Logan reassured her they would guide her through the process. You're not alone in this, Emily promised. Despite the mounting tension, Rebecca clung to the small victories. She completed her first workshop at the charity, earning a certificate of achievement. Stacy presented it to her during a small ceremony, and Rebecca's heart swelled with a mix of pride and disbelief. This is just the beginning, Stacy said, her smile radiant. You're capable of so much more than you realize. At the art program's showcase, Daniel's drawing, a vibrant depiction of a storm giving way to sunlight, captured the attention of everyone in attendance. He stood nervously as Miss Claire introduced him, his hands fidgeting at his sides. This piece, Miss Claire said, symbolizes resilience and hope. Daniel, would you like to say a few words about your inspiration? Daniel glanced at Rebecca and Lily, drawing strength from their presence. This is about my family, he said, his voice steady. We've been through some tough times, but we're stronger together. The audience erupted into applause, and Rebecca's chest ached with pride as she held Lily close. That evening, as the family celebrated Daniel's success, a knock at the door shattered the moment. Rebecca's heart raced as she opened it to find a plain envelope lying on the welcome mat. Inside was a photo of her and Lily, walking home from the charity earlier that week, accompanied by the chilling words, "You'll never escape me." The weight of the photograph pressed down on Rebecca's chest as she stood frozen in the doorway. The image, her and Lily, unaware they were being watched, was clear proof that Victor was closer than ever. Her fingers trembled as she folded the photo and note, tucking them into her pocket. She didn't want Daniel to see. "Who was it, Mom?" Daniel called from the couch, his voice bright with the lingering excitement from his art showcase. Rebecca forced a smile and closed the door. "Just some mail," she replied, her voice steady but hollow. As Daniel turned his attention back to Lily, who was busy tugging at the hem of her blanket, Rebecca's heart raced. She needed to protect them, but the shadow of her past was growing darker by the second. The next morning, Rebecca sat across from Emily and Detective Logan Reyes at the police station. The photograph and note lay between them on the desk, stark against the polished wood. Logan leaned forward, his expression grim. "This changes everything," he said. "Victor isn't just making idle threats anymore. He's actively stalking you." Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the chill spreading through her body. "I knew he'd come back," she whispered. "I just didn't know when." Logan's voice was firm but reassuring. "We'll do everything we can to keep you and your children safe. This is what we're going to do. Install a security system in your apartment, alert your neighbors, and file for a restraining order immediately. The word restraining order made Rebecca flinch. The idea of provoking Victor terrified her. What if it makes him angrier? She asked. Emily reached across the table, placing a hand over Rebecca's. It's about building a legal foundation, she said gently. If he tries anything, the restraining order gives us the authority to act. That afternoon, Emily accompanied Rebecca back to the apartment. Logan had arranged for a handyman to install deadbolts and a peephole camera. Daniel watched from the kitchen table, his sketch pad open but untouched. His usually vibrant strokes were replaced with hesitant lines, the weight of the situation affecting even his creative outlet. As the handyman worked, Rebecca pulled Emily aside. How do I keep Daniel from worrying? He's just a kid, but I can tell he knows something's wrong. Emily sighed, her face lined with concern. Honesty, but with boundaries, she said. Tell him enough to prepare him, but not enough to scare him. Kids are resilient, Rebecca. He'll take his cues from you. That evening, Rebecca sat with Daniel on the couch, Lily nestled between them. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Daniel, I need to talk to you about something. His brown eyes, so much like his father's, met hers. Is this about the photo? He asked softly. Rebecca's heart sank. How did you? I saw it on the counter, he admitted. Mom, is someone trying to hurt us? Rebecca hesitated, choosing her words carefully. We're safe right now, she said. But there's someone from my past, someone who might want to scare us. That's why we're putting up new locks and cameras, to make sure they can't hurt us. Daniel's face hardened, a determination far beyond his years settling in. I'll protect Lily, he said firmly. Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. You're so brave, she whispered, pulling him into a hug. But that's my job. You just focus on being a kid, okay? Days turned into weeks, and the Taylor family adjusted to their heightened security measures. Rebecca attended self-defense classes at Emily's encouragement, learning techniques to protect herself and her children. The first class left her muscles sore, but the sense of empowerment was undeniable. During one session, the instructor, a former Marine named Elena, demonstrated how to break free from a wrist grab. It's not about strength, Elena said, but confidence and technique. Rebecca paired up with another woman, practicing the moves over and over until they became second nature. Each successful attempt chipped away at her fear, replacing it with a growing sense of control. Meanwhile, Logan's investigation into Victor intensified. He reviewed security footage from the apartment complex, canvassed local businesses for sightings, and dug into Victor's recent activities. One afternoon, he called Emily to share a disturbing discovery. Victor's been moving from state to state, Logan said. He has a pattern of tracking his victims, waiting until they feel safe before making his move. Emily's stomach churned. And now, he's here. It looks that way, Logan confirmed. But we'll catch him. I won't let him hurt them again. Despite the looming threat, Daniel found solace in his art program. Ms. Claire, his instructor, encouraged him to channel his emotions into his work. Art can be a way to process what you're feeling, she told him. Daniel took her advice to heart, creating a piece that depicted a lone figure standing in the rain, a faint light breaking through the clouds. When he showed it to Rebecca, she was struck by its depth and poignancy. It's beautiful, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've captured something so real. Daniel shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. It's how I feel sometimes, but I think the light means things will get better. The fragile sense of peace was shattered one evening when Rebecca spotted Victor near the children's school. He stood across the street, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. Rebecca's blood ran cold as their eyes met, a cruel smirk spreading across his lips. She called Emily immediately, her voice shaking. "He's here," she said. "At the school." "Stay where you are," Emily instructed. "I'm on my way." By the time Emily and Logan arrived, Victor was gone, leaving Rebecca shaken and terrified. Logan reassured her they were tightening the net around him. "He's making mistakes," Logan said. "It's only a matter of time before we catch him." That night, Rebecca sat awake, long after Daniel and Lily had gone to bed. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like a physical force. She pulled out her notebook, writing down every fear and every hope that coursed through her mind. It was a small act of catharsis, a way to remind herself of the strength she was slowly reclaiming. She ended her entry with a promise to herself and her children. "We will get through this together." Early the next morning, Rebecca opened her door to find another envelope. This time, it contained not just a photograph, but a map with their apartment circled in red. Beneath it were the words, "Soon it all ends." Rebecca's hands trembled as she stared at the map. The words, "Soon it all ends," seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. She quickly folded the paper, her pulse pounding in her ears. She couldn't let Daniel or Lily see it. Across the apartment, Lily giggled from her playpen, oblivious to the tension that gripped her mother. Rebecca forced a breath and steadied herself. She had to act fast. Later that morning, Rebecca sat in the police station's conference room with Emily and Logan. The map and note lay on the table between them, stark evidence of Victor's escalating aggression. Logan studied the map with a frown. "This isn't just a threat. It's a declaration. He's making it clear he knows exactly where you are." Emily leaned forward, her voice steady but urgent. "Rebecca, this is the tipping point. We need to act now." Rebecca hesitated, her fingers curling into fists. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if pushing back makes him angrier?" Logan met her gaze with firm resolve. "He's already angry, Rebecca. But the more he escalates, the more evidence we gather. We'll stop him before he can act." Emily placed a comforting hand on Rebecca's arm. "You've been taking steps to protect your family. Self-defense classes, security upgrades. This is just another step. You're not alone in this." That evening, Logan supervised the installation of additional security measures at Rebecca's apartment. Cameras were mounted outside the building, and motion sensors were added to the windows. Daniel watched the activity with wide eyes, his sketchpad clutched to his chest. Rebecca knelt beside him. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said softly. "This is just to keep us safe." Daniel frowned. "Is it because of the man from the photo?" Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but we're taking every precaution. Nothing will happen to us." Daniel's expression hardened with determination. "I'll protect Lily," he said, echoing his earlier promise. Rebecca pulled him into a tight hug, her heart aching at how much he'd had to grow up too soon. "You're so brave," she whispered. "But let me handle this, okay?" 2 nights later, the Taylor family's newfound calm was shattered when Victor appeared at the apartment building. Rebecca spotted him through the peephole as he stood in the hallway, his silhouette menacing under the dim light. Her heart raced as he knocked sharply. "Rebecca," Victor called, his voice low and mocking. "I just want to talk." Rebecca's breath came in short gasps as she grabbed her phone and dialed Emily. "He's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Stay calm," Emily replied. "Don't open the door. I'm on my way." Victor's knocking grew louder, more insistent. Rebecca clutched Lily tightly, her mind racing. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm her, She remembered the techniques from her self-defense classes. She focused on her breathing, calming her nerves. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of sirens filled the air. Victor cursed under his breath and retreated down the hallway. Rebecca peeked through the peephole, her legs trembling with relief as she watched him disappear into the night. The next day, Rebecca met with Logan at the station to file a formal complaint. "He's getting bolder," Logan said. "But so are we. Filing this report strengthens our case." Rebecca nodded, her resolve hardening. "What else can I do?" Logan considered for a moment. "File for a restraining order. It's not just a legal tool. It's a message that you're taking control." Though the idea terrified her, Rebecca agreed. With Emily by her side, she submitted the paperwork, each signature a declaration of her determination to protect her family. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself stepping into a new role within his art program. His latest painting, depicting a mother and child surrounded by storm clouds but illuminated by a single beam of light, had earned widespread praise. Miss Claire, his instructor, invited him to lead a workshop for younger students. At first, Daniel hesitated. "I'm not a teacher," he said nervously. Miss Claire smiled. "You don't have to be. Just share your story and let them see your passion. They'll learn from you." During the workshop, Daniel guided the younger kids with surprising confidence. He showed them how to blend colors, to create depth, and how to use light to convey emotion. Watching their faces light up with understanding, he felt a spark of pride. When he returned home that evening, Rebecca greeted him with a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. As the weeks passed, Rebecca grew stronger in both body and spirit. The self-defense classes became a refuge, a place where she could channel her fear into action. Under Elena's guidance, she learned how to disable an attacker and escape dangerous situations. One evening, Elena pulled Rebecca aside after class. "You've come a long way," she said. "But remember, self-defense is about more than just physical techniques." Rebecca showed the message to Emily, her hands shaking. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily's jaw tightened. "Control," she said. "But we're not going to let him have it." Logan reviewed the text and added it to their growing file of evidence. "We're closing in on him," he assured Rebecca. "He's making mistakes, and we'll use them to bring him down." Despite the looming threat, the Taylor family found moments of joy. Daniel's art continued to flourish, and Lily's health improved with regular checkups and proper nutrition. Neighbors pitched in to help, offering babysitting and sharing meals. Rebecca began to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. She knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was moving forward. Cliffhanger. Late one night, Rebecca heard the sound of footsteps outside her apartment. She froze, her heart pounding. Peering through the peephole, she saw a shadowy figure pacing back and forth. The next morning, she found a package on her doorstep. Inside was a photo of her from years ago, along with a single chilling sentence: "You'll never escape me." The early morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the Taylor family's apartment, painting the walls with pale gold streaks. Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee. The package from the night before lay unopened in the middle of the table, its edges slightly crumpled from her grip. Daniel shuffled into the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mom?" he asked softly. "What's wrong?" Rebecca forced a smile, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. "Nothing, sweetheart," she lied. "Go get ready for school." After dropping Daniel off at school, Rebecca met Emily at the police station. Logan was already waiting in the conference room. the package from the night before, carefully sealed in an evidence bag. "This is escalating," Logan said, his voice steady but grave. "Victor's not just trying to intimidate you. He's reminding you of the control he used to have." Emily leaned forward, her tone firm but comforting. "But he doesn't have that control anymore, Rebecca. You've taken steps to protect yourself and your family, and we're taking steps to stop him." Rebecca nodded, her resolve hardening. "What's next?" Logan outlined their plan: increased surveillance on Victor's known associates, a review of his financial records, and a meeting with the district attorney to discuss additional charges. Meanwhile, Daniel found solace in his art program. Miss Claire noticed his recent paintings had grown darker: stormy skies, shadowy figures, and jagged lines that seemed to vibrate with tension. "Are you okay, Daniel?" she asked gently as she crouched beside him during class. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "It just helps me sort out my thoughts," he said. "When I draw, it's like I can make sense of everything." Miss Claire smiled. "Art is powerful that way. But remember, you can talk to someone too. You don't have to carry everything on your own." Daniel's expression softened. "Thanks, Miss Claire." Later that week, Rebecca took a major step forward. She started a part-time cleaning job at a local office building. Though the work was physically demanding and the hours long, Rebecca found a strange sense of peace in the routine. Each task, wiping down desks, vacuuming carpets, scrubbing break room counters, felt like a small piece of her life being put back in order. One evening, as she finished her shift, her manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Johnson, approached her. "Rebecca, you've been doing excellent work," she said. "I'd like to offer you more hours if you're interested." Rebecca blinked, momentarily stunned. "Thank you," she stammered. "I'd love that." Walking home that night, Rebecca felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, she could see a path forward. Back at the apartment, Daniel was hard at work on a new painting for an upcoming school competition. His piece, titled From Darkness to Light, depicted a family standing together under stormy skies, their faces turned toward a golden beam of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Rebecca paused in the doorway of his room, her heart swelling with pride as she watched him work. "That's beautiful, Daniel," she said softly. Daniel looked up, his cheeks flushing with a mixture of pride and shyness. "It's about us," he said. "How we're getting through everything." Rebecca hugged him tightly. "You're amazing. You know that?" Despite the progress, the family's challenges were far from over. One evening, a package arrived at the apartment containing an old photo of Rebecca with Victor, along with a handwritten note. "You'll never escape me." Rebecca's hands shook as she read the message. Her first instinct was to pack up and leave, but Emily's voice echoed in her mind. "You've taken steps to protect yourself and your family." Instead, Rebecca called Emily and Logan. "He sent another message," she said, her voice trembling. "What should I do?" "We document everything," Logan replied. "The more evidence we have, the stronger our case." As the days passed, Rebecca leaned more heavily on her newfound community. Stacy Carter, the head of the family support charity, introduced Rebecca to a group of single mothers who met weekly to share their experiences and support each other. At first, Rebecca was hesitant to open up, but as she listened to the other women's stories, tales of resilience, fear, and hard-won victories, she began to feel a sense of belonging. During one meeting, Rebecca finally shared her own story. Her voice trembled as she recounted her past with Victor, the manipulation, the fear, and the long road to reclaiming her independence. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before one of the women, a mother of 3 named Angela, spoke. You're stronger than you realize, Rebecca, Angela said. You're here, you're fighting, and you're not alone. Rebecca also took steps to ensure her children felt secure. She began attending parenting workshops at the charity, learning new ways to communicate with Daniel and create a sense of stability for Lily. One evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Rebecca sat with Daniel at the kitchen table. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then said, "I worry about you, Mom, but I'm proud of you too." Rebecca blinked back tears. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. More than you know." The family's progress was celebrated when Daniel's painting won third place in the school art competition. At the award ceremony, Rebecca beamed with pride as Daniel accepted his ribbon, his face glowing with joy. As they walked home, Daniel clutched his ribbon tightly. "I'm going to hang this in the living room," he announced, "so we can all see it every day." Rebecca smiled, her heart swelling with love and pride. "That sounds perfect." Cliffhanger. That evening, Rebecca received a text message from an unknown number. The message contained a single sentence: "I'm closer than you think." Rebecca's heart pounded as she stared at the screen. Despite the progress they'd made, the shadow of Victor still loomed large. But this time, Rebecca wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions. She called Emily and Logan, her voice steady as she said, "We need to talk." The early morning light spilled across the Taylor family's apartment, chasing away the shadows of the previous night. Rebecca stood at the counter, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, gazing out the window. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the message she'd received. "I'm closer than you think." Those words lingered, an unrelenting reminder of the danger Victor posed. But today wasn't about fear. Today, Rebecca was determined to take another step forward. Rebecca met Emily at a nearby park, where a community event was taking place. Families spread out across the green, children laughing as they chased each other, and vendors lined the walkway selling handmade crafts and baked goods. Emily greeted Rebecca with a warm smile, handing her a flyer. "I thought this might help," she said. The flyer detailed a support group meeting hosted by Stacy Carter, specifically for survivors of abuse. "I don't know if I can do this," Rebecca admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to share anything until you're ready," Emily reassured her. "But you'll find strength in being around others who understand." That evening, Rebecca arrived at the community center. The room was modest, with a circle of chairs set up under soft, welcoming lighting. As Rebecca hesitated near the door, Stacy spotted her and came over. "I'm so glad you're here," Stacy said warmly. "Take your time. There's no pressure to speak." Rebecca chose a seat near the back, her hands gripping her purse tightly. As the meeting began, other women shared their stories, tales of resilience and pain, hope and determination. Slowly, Rebecca felt herself relaxing. These women understood her struggles in a way no one else could. When the meeting ended, Stacy introduced Rebecca to Angela, a woman in her mid-30s, with an easy smile. "If you ever need someone to talk to outside of meetings, I'm here," Angela said, handing Rebecca her number. For the first time in a long while, Rebecca felt a glimmer of connection. Meanwhile, Daniel was thriving in his art program. His teacher, Miss Claire, had noticed his growing confidence and invited him to mentor younger students. "You have a natural way of encouraging others," she told him. Daniel hesitated. "What if I mess up?" Miss Claire smiled. "Mistakes are just opportunities to learn. You'll be great." The first session was nerve-wracking for Daniel, but as he guided a younger student through drawing a simple landscape, he found joy in the process. "This is actually kind of fun," he admitted to Ms. Claire afterward. At home, Rebecca and Emily worked on strengthening the family's security measures. Logan had arranged for a professional locksmith to install reinforced deadbolts and a security camera. They also added motion sensor lights outside the apartment. "This is just the beginning," Logan said. "We're going to make sure you and your kids are safe." Rebecca nodded, grateful, but still wary. "What about Victor?" "We're building a strong case," Logan assured her. "He won't get away with this." Rebecca's confidence grew as she began attending the support group regularly. She found herself opening up more, sharing pieces of her story with the group. Angela became a close friend, often checking in with encouraging texts or surprise visits. One afternoon, Angela brought over a casserole and sat with Rebecca in the kitchen. "You're stronger than you think," Angela said. "I can see it in the way you fight for your kids." Rebecca smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. Daniel's art also continued to flourish. He started working on a new project, a mural for the community center. It depicted a tree with deep roots and strong branches, symbolizing growth and resilience. When the mural was unveiled, Rebecca couldn't contain her pride. "It's beautiful," she told Daniel, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel beamed. "I wanted it to represent us." But the threat of Victor still loomed. Logan uncovered evidence that Victor had been tracking his victims for years, using a network of associates to gather information. "We've got enough to file additional charges," Logan told Rebecca during a meeting. "But we need to stay vigilant." Rebecca's fear flared, but she refused to let it control her. She continued attending self-defense classes, growing more confident with each session. One evening, as she practiced breaking free from a wrist grab, she felt a surge of empowerment. "I can do this," she thought. "I can protect my family." The Taylor family's support network grew as neighbors began pitching in. Mrs. Chen from across the hall offered to babysit Lily, while Mr. Martinez downstairs helped Daniel with his school projects. The sense of community bolstered Rebecca's spirits. One evening, Rebecca invited the neighbors over for a small dinner party. As they gathered around the table, sharing stories and laughter, Rebecca realized how far they had come. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've made us feel like we belong." Cliffhanger. Late that night, Rebecca received another letter, slipped under the door. This one contained a grainy photo of Daniel walking home from school, with the chilling words, "You can't protect them forever." Rebecca's hands shook as she showed the letter to Emily the next morning. "He's getting bolder," Emily said, her expression grim. "But we're ready for him." Rebecca took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. "Then let's make sure he never gets the chance." The wind howled outside the Taylor family's apartment, rattling the windows as Rebecca paced the living room. In her hand, she held the grainy photo of Daniel walking home from school. The chilling note attached still fresh in her mind. Every creak of the floorboards made her heart race, but fear would not rule her life anymore. Not now, not after all they had fought for. Rebecca dialed Emily's number with trembling fingers. Within minutes, Emily was at her door, her face lined with concern. "This changes everything," Emily said, studying the note. "We need to escalate this. Logan's team can help track where this came from." Rebecca nodded, though her hands still shook. "I can't let him get near my kids, Emily." "I won't." Emily placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We'll stop him." The next morning, Rebecca met with Logan at the police station. The photo was handed off to the forensic team, who promised to analyze it for any clues, fingerprints, metadata, or a traceable address. Logan's calm demeanor reassured Rebecca, but the waiting felt like torture. "We have to act fast," Rebecca said, her voice filled with urgency. He's not just threatening me, he's targeting my kids. We're building the case, Logan assured her. But we need to catch him in the act to ensure he can't slip through the cracks. Emily, Rebecca, and Logan devised a plan to lure Victor into a public area where he could be apprehended without putting the family in danger. They chose the community park, a place bustling with people, but also easy to secure. Rebecca hesitated. What if he doesn't take the bait? He will, Logan said firmly. Men like Victor thrive on control. He won't be able to resist if he thinks that you're vulnerable. On the day of the plan, Rebecca was a bundle of nerves. She sat on a bench near the park's playground, Lily in her stroller and Daniel by her side. Emily stood nearby, dressed casually, but with her hand resting on the concealed radio at her hip. Logan and his team were stationed out of sight, ready to move at the first sign of trouble. Rebecca's heart pounded with every passing minute. The park seemed too quiet, despite the children laughing and playing nearby. Then she saw him. Victor stood across the street, leaning casually against a lamppost, his eyes fixed on her. He smirked as their eyes met, and a chill ran down Rebecca's spine. She gripped the stroller tightly, her knuckles white. Victor approached slowly. His gait relaxed, as if they were old friends meeting by chance. Rebecca, he said, his voice dripping with false charm. You look tense. Rebecca swallowed hard, forcing herself to hold his gaze. You don't belong here, Victor. Leave us alone. He chuckled, the sound sending a wave of dread through her. You think a piece of paper is going to stop me? You know me better than that. Rebecca clenched her fists. I'm not the woman you used to control. You have no power over me. Victor's smile faltered, a flicker of anger crossing his face. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You'll always be mine, Rebecca. That was the moment Logan's team sprang into action. Officers emerged from every direction, surrounding Victor before he could react. He struggled briefly, but the officers were prepared, quickly subduing him. You've made a big mistake, Victor snarled as they cuffed him. This isn't over. It is for you, Logan replied coolly. We've got enough to put you away for a long time. Rebecca watched as Victor was led away, her knees weak with relief. Emily was by her side in an instant, steadying her. You did it, Emily said softly. It's over. Rebecca shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Not yet. But it's a start. In the days that followed, the community rallied around Rebecca and her family. Neighbors brought meals, watched the kids, and offered words of encouragement. The security measures around the apartment were reinforced further, and Rebecca began sleeping just a little more soundly at night. Daniel, ever resilient, poured his emotions into his art. His latest piece depicted a tree with storm clouds overhead, but roots that ran deep, grounding it against the chaos. It's us, he explained to Rebecca. Strong, no matter what. Logan updated Rebecca regularly on the case against Victor. The charges were extensive: stalking, harassment, and violating the restraining order. But the most significant evidence was the collection of threats Victor had left, each one now carefully catalogued as part of the case. He won't have a chance to hurt you again, Logan said during one meeting. We'll make sure of it. Rebecca nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. I'm ready to face him if I have to. The confrontation with Victor had changed Rebecca. Where fear had once dictated her actions, she now felt a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into her self-defense classes, mastering techniques that made her feel physically and emotionally empowered. At the same time, she continued attending the support group. Angela and the other women celebrated her victory, reminding her how far she had come. You're an inspiration, Angela told her, If you can stand up to him, so can we. Daniel's art continued to flourish as well. His teacher, Ms. Clare, submitted his latest piece to a citywide competition, where it won second place. The recognition bolstered Daniel's confidence, and he began dreaming of a future as a professional artist. Maybe I'll draw comic books one day, he told Rebecca with a grin. And I'll be your biggest fan, she replied, ruffling his hair. Cliffhanger. As Rebecca tucked Lily into bed one evening, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, her breath catching, as she heard the voice on the other end. You think you've won? Victor's voice was low and menacing. This isn't over. Rebecca ended the call, her hands trembling. She turned to Emily, who had just arrived for a late-night check-in. He called, Rebecca said, her voice shaky but determined. What do we do now? Emily's eyes narrowed with resolve. We fight back. Together. You've made a big mistake, Victor snarled as they cuffed him. This isn't over. It is for you, Logan replied coolly. We've got enough to put you away for a long time. Rebecca watched as Victor was led away, her knees weak with relief. Emily was by her side in an instant, steadying her. You did it, Emily said softly. It's over. Rebecca shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Not yet. But it's a start. In the days that followed, the community rallied around Rebecca and her family. Neighbors brought meals, watched the kids, and offered words of encouragement. The security measures around the apartment were reinforced further, and Rebecca began sleeping just a little more soundly at night. Daniel, ever resilient, poured his emotions into his art. His latest piece depicted a tree with storm clouds overhead, but roots that ran deep, grounding it against the chaos. It's us, he explained to Rebecca. Strong, no matter what. Logan updated Rebecca regularly on the case against Victor. The charges were extensive: stalking, harassment, and violating the restraining order. But the most significant evidence was the collection of threats Victor had left, each one now carefully catalogued as part of the case. He won't have a chance to hurt you again, Logan said during one meeting. We'll make sure of it. Rebecca nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. I'm ready to face him if I have to. The confrontation with Victor had changed Rebecca. Where fear had once dictated her actions, she now felt a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into her self-defense classes, mastering techniques that made her feel physically and emotionally empowered. At the same time, she continued attending the support group. Angela and the other women celebrated her victory, reminding her how far she had come. You're an inspiration, Angela told her. If you can stand up to him, so can we. Daniel's art continued to flourish as well. His teacher, Ms. Clare, submitted his latest piece to a citywide competition, where it won second place. The recognition bolstered Daniel's confidence, and he began dreaming of a future as a professional artist. Maybe I'll draw comic books one day, he told Rebecca with a grin. And I'll be your biggest fan, she replied, ruffling his hair. Cliffhanger. As Rebecca tucked Lily into bed one evening, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, her breath catching, as she heard the voice on the other end. You think you've won? Victor's voice was low and menacing. This isn't over. Rebecca ended the call, her hands trembling. She turned to Emily, who had just arrived for a late-night check-in. He called, Rebecca said, her voice shaky but determined. What do we do now? Emily's eyes narrowed with resolve. We fight back. Together. You've done everything right, Emily said. This is the kind of progress that makes a difference. Rebecca nodded, though the weight of Victor's threats still lingered in her mind. I just want this to be over, she admitted. It will be, Logan said firmly. And when it is, you'll come out stronger on the other side. As the days turned into weeks, Rebecca began to feel a sense of normalcy returning to their lives. She excelled in her classes, earning praise from her instructor for her quick understanding of accounting principles. Her job provided a steady income, and the support from her neighbors and community continued to grow. Daniel, too, found himself thriving. His painting, now titled From Darkness to Light, was selected for the citywide art exhibit. The recognition boosted his confidence even further, and he began dreaming of a future where his art could inspire others. The night of the exhibit arrived, and the Taylor family, along with Emily, Logan, and their neighbors, gathered in the bustling gallery. The walls were adorned with paintings, sculptures, and mixed-media pieces from young artists across the city. Rebecca felt a surge of pride as she spotted Daniel's painting prominently displayed in the center of the room. As the judges moved from piece to piece, Daniel clutched Rebecca's hand tightly. His nerves were palpable, but so was his excitement. When the winners were announced, Daniel's name was called for first place. The room erupted in applause, and Rebecca's heart swelled as she watched her son step forward to accept his award. His face was a mixture of disbelief and joy, and as he held the ribbon aloft, Rebecca knew they had turned a corner. Back at home, they celebrated with their neighbors, who had come together to throw a small party. The living room was filled with laughter, the sound of Lily's giggles mixing with the chatter of adults and children alike. Rebecca looked around the room, her heart full. For the first time in years, she felt not just hope, but a sense of belonging. Cliffhanger. As Rebecca cleaned up after the party, she noticed an envelope on the counter that she hadn't seen before. Her stomach tightened as she opened it, revealing a letter from Victor's family. The words were unexpected. An apology, acknowledging the pain he had caused, and offering support if she ever needed it. Rebecca stared at the letter, her emotions a whirlwind. Could this be the closure she had been seeking? Or was it another twist in the story? The park was alive with the sounds of spring. Children's laughter floated through the air, blending with the rustling of leaves and the occasional bark of a distant dog. Rebecca spread a checkered picnic blanket under the shade of an old oak tree, her movements purposeful yet serene. The gentle breeze carried the scents of blooming flowers and fresh-cut grass, a stark contrast to the tense, uncertain days that once defined her life. Lily babbled happily in her stroller, her tiny hands reaching for a toy dangling above her. Daniel was just a few feet away, crouched over his sketchbook, already immersed in a new creation. And then there was Emily, walking toward them with her ever-present warm smile, a wicker basket in hand. "Ready for some apple pie?" Emily called, her voice carrying a note of familiarity and comfort that Rebecca had come to cherish. "Always," Daniel replied with a grin, not looking up from his sketch. Rebecca smiled, taking a deep breath. This was their new reality, a life of simplicity, stability, and most importantly, hope. The past few months had been transformative for the Taylor family. Rebecca's part-time cleaning job had turned into a full-time position with benefits, thanks to a glowing recommendation from her supervisor. Her accounting classes were progressing steadily, and she had already passed her first major exam, with flying colors. The certificate was within reach, and with it, the promise of a career that could provide the stability she had long dreamed of for her children. Daniel, meanwhile, had become something of a local celebrity after winning the citywide art exhibit. His painting From Darkness to Light had struck a chord with viewers, and he was invited to speak at a local gallery about the inspiration behind his work. "I just painted what I felt," Daniel had said at the event, his voice steady despite the large audience. "It's about my family, about finding hope even when things seem impossible." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Rebecca's chest swelled with pride as she watched her son step into his own light. Today's picnic was a celebration of these milestones. Emily and Logan had joined them, along with Stacy and several neighbors from the apartment complex. The sense of community was palpable, as everyone contributed something to the feast: sandwiches, fruit, drinks, and of course, Emily's famous pie. "You've come so far, Rebecca," Stacy said, sitting beside her on the blanket. "I hope you're taking a moment to appreciate everything you've achieved." Rebecca glanced at Daniel, who was showing his latest sketches to a group of fascinated children. Lily, now walking unsteadily, but with determination, toddled toward a patch of daisies, her laughter echoing through the park. "I do," Rebecca replied, her voice soft. "But there's still so much to do." "And you'll do it," Emily chimed in, passing a slice of pie. "You're one of the strongest women I've ever met, Rebecca." Rebecca looked at her old friend, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emily." As the afternoon stretched into evening, the group packed up their picnic and began heading back to the apartment complex. Daniel lagged behind, captivated by the way the setting sun cast golden light through the trees. He stopped to capture the moment in his sketchbook, his pencil moving swiftly across the page. "Come on, artist," Rebecca called gently, smiling as she watched him work. "Dinner won't make itself." Daniel laughed, closing his sketchbook and hurrying to catch up. "I'm coming." Back at the apartment, Rebecca prepared a simple yet hearty dinner. The apartment was cozy and warm, the scent of baked pasta wafting through the air. Daniel helped set the table, his chatter filled with excitement about his next art project, a mural he had been asked to create for the community center. "Do you think I should include the park?" he asked, carefully placing forks beside each plate. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Rebecca said, ruffling his hair. "It's a special place for us now." As they sat down to eat, the doorbell rang. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Daniel before getting up to answer it. To her surprise, it was Mrs. Martinez, their neighbor from across the hall, holding a small potted plant. "I just wanted to say thank you," Mrs. Martinez said, "for everything you've done for the building. Organizing that cleanup day was such a kind gesture." Rebecca accepted the plant, her cheeks flushing with humility. "It was a team effort," she said. "We all deserve to live in a place we're proud of." As Mrs. Martinez left, Rebecca placed the plant on the windowsill, where it caught the last rays of the setting sun. Later that night, after the children were in bed, Rebecca sat by the window with a cup of tea. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. She thought about the letter from Victor's family, which she had tucked away in a drawer. The apology had been unexpected, and while it didn't erase the past, it offered a strange sense of closure. She decided to write back, not to rekindle any connection, but to express her gratitude for their acknowledgement. It was another step forward, another piece of the past she could finally lay to rest. The next morning, Rebecca woke to the sound of Daniel's laughter. She found him in the living room, playing peekaboo with Lily, who squealed with delight each time he hid behind his hands. The sight filled her with a profound sense of peace. "Ready for your big day?" she asked Daniel, who was set to begin work on his mural. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, his smile brimming with confidence. Rebecca kissed the top of his head. "I'm so proud of you." The story ended where it had begun, in the embrace of hope. As Daniel sketched their family beneath the oak tree in the park, titling the piece "Our Safe Haven," Rebecca knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. Together, they had faced the storm, and together, they had found the light. As the sun sets on Rebecca and Daniel's journey, we're reminded that even in the darkest moments, hope has a way of breaking through. Their story may have found its safe haven, but it's also a reminder that there are countless untold stories out there of resilience, a love, and the quiet strength of those who refuse to give up. What did this story mean to you? Did Rebecca's courage, Daniel's creativity, or little Lily's laughter touch your heart? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to share this story with someone who might need a little inspiration today. If you're not already part of our family, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter in our series of hope and humanity. Another story is just around the corner, one that might inspire you even more. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Star.